Not too long ago at our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast, we were talking about using the Lord's name in vain. It's a pretty clear picture of why we shouldn't do that. When we go even back to the law, one of the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, verse 7 says, "You shall not take the name of Yahweh your God in vain, for Yahweh will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain." And at that point, we pointed out that names in biblical times pointed to the identity of the person. So it wasn't just that you're using somebody's name in a derogatory way. You're actually you're defaming in some way their very character by saying ugly things or deceitful things or cursing in the name of the Lord. When we do that, we are actually speaking of God himself, because his name identifies who he is. And so that's why this verse of scripture, this commandment of the 10 Commandments, is so powerful and tells us so clearly not to take his name in vain, and also pronounces upon us a consequence if we do that. We'll not go unpunished when you take his name in vain. So this is a serious command connected with a consequence, a serious consequence for those that ignore this. And now most Christians are not going to use the Lord's name as part of a curse word. They're not going to use his name in vain in the broad sense as we think of it. But there is this maybe a different kind of doing the same thing that the person who sent this question is actually concerned about. They said using God's name flippantly and in exasperation has become commonplace today. How do you help someone see that the terms OMG, I trust you know what that means, and Jesus Christ in an exclamatory, angry fashion is not honoring to his name and is something that is sinful and we should not do it? So that's a good question, because these terms, these OMGs and so forth, that are flipped around, or even the full word itself, which I'm not using because I do too have a great concern about this. When we say these things, we are inadvertently defaming the character and the name of God, I believe. We probably don't mean to do that. We're probably not thinking when we do so that we are in some sense being derogatory towards God himself, or that we're breaking the commandment in the book of Exodus. But I believe we are without realizing it. I think we need to sharpen up our language. And this is hard when we hear everybody around us using these kinds of terms. And it's hard when we're in a workplace or a school environment in which everybody is using, or not everybody, but lots of people are using very ugly language, very, very much taking the Lord's name in vain. And it just becomes part of who we are. And it's not always easy to keep that out of our minds and out of our words. So I understand that if you have that environment, but still we need to sharpen up. We need to be careful in what we're saying when we're talking about the Lord. And then when we think about those who actually use the Lord's name in vain, using the explanation of Christ this or that when they're angry, and you hear this ugly stuff and swear words on a regular basis, I hope not by too many Christians. But if you've come out of an environment where that was common and you have not yet sharpened your thinking and your words, you might find yourself saying things like that sometimes. Remember, the Lord will forgive all sins, but I do think it's wrong, it's a sinful thing to use the Lord's name in that way. I find it interesting, if sad, to think that there's no other religion in the world that I know of that uses their deity's name as part of a swear word except Christianity. And people who claim to be Christians are Christianized who do so. For example, you never hear anyone saying, "Oh, my Allah," or "Oh, my Muhammad," or "Oh, my Buddha," or any of these kinds of things. Nobody does that. You have to wonder why. And it seems to be that these people have more respect for their deities and leaders than a lot of Christianized people do. But also I think it is Satan's great conspiracy, so to speak. He wants to tear down God and his name and his person every way he possibly can. And so perhaps he has implanted this in such a way that this is becoming common language among many Americans and many Westerners and many who would claim to be Christians and go to church, perhaps on a regular basis, but still use the Lord's name in this way. As James says, my brother, these things ought not to be. I hope we take this seriously and adjust our own speech if we need to.